is Wednesday, April 8th, 2026 at 6 p.m. in the evening. We are in the Muncie Sanitary District conference room for our Muncie Ethics Commission this evening. We would like to start with a call to order and our roll call, please.
Susan Dillon.
Here.
Jim Lowe here. Frank Scott.
Here.
Chip Taylor.
Here.
Sandra Whitaker.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the previous minutes. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All who approve, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, the same. Okay, we do not have any initial actions on ethics complaints at this meeting or any further action on ethics complaints. So that brings us to the next order of business, which would be old business. Does anybody have any old business they would like to discuss?
I do not.
Okay, moving on to new business. On our agenda, we have review and discuss transparency portal. And I have asked Chip to do sort of a background for the public on what that entails.
Okay.
And then after your presentation, then we can have a discussion.
Yeah. Really give you a little handout that I prepared that we can put up online for people to access. But basically, so this handout explains that, section 43.02 of the Code of Ethics charges this commission with oversight of a transparency portal to make ethics related information available to the public. And so we got a little one page sheet here to sort of explain to people how to access the transparency portal and give them a little bit of information about what they'll find there. So, you can go to the Muncie Ethics Commission page on the city website, and in the middle of it, about halfway down the page, there's like big letters says transparency portal. You click on that, it'll take you there. We make this available for download. If you've got the PDF, this will be a clickable link here. And if you end up with a printable version, this QR code down in the corner will take you to the Muncie Ethics Commission page. And thanks to Belinda Munson for fixing that up for us. So anyway, once you get to the transparency portal, if you've ever got into the MuniDocs thing, like to look at city council, agendas, it's in that same functionality on the city's website, part of the Unicode, and there's a separate folder set up there for a transparency portal. The Code of Ethics lists kind of 8 categories of documents or information that's supposed to be there, and so there are 8 folders that each have that, and they correspond to the list that's in the ordinance. And so the first one, number 1, we're supposed to provide a copy of the Code of Ethics and Procedures. And so you can find a copy of the ordinance that has it there, and then all the procedures that we developed last year and approved for public hearings, or our electronic meeting policy, any of that, you can, people can find that there. The second one, there's a list of Ethics Commission members. Of course, all the current members are listed on the page with our email addresses and our terms and our appointing authority as required by law. But if you look in this folder, you'll find a file for each year that shows who was serving that year, what term they served or were serving. Like you look back, it shows when WC filed, served for a time, and then he retired. Frank came on, like it shows that. I talked to Belinda Munson and Lacey Jones when we were setting this up, and since we're subject to term limits and term limits, and then there's a period of time you got to be out before you would be eligible. We felt it was important to have all that information stored. We've got the advantage of starting from scratch, so like they can always go back through if there's ever any question. If somebody had, if they're trying to appoint somebody and they've been on before and they want to know if they've been off long enough, you can look it up there. The third section is for conflict of interest forms. And so what we've got there is there's just a downloadable copy of the State Board of Accounts form for employees or other public officials to declare a conflict of interest. Copies of conflicts of interest they file are stored in another folder that we'll talk about in a bit. Folder 4 is advisory opinions issued by the Ethics Commission, and so like it explains here, there's a process for people covered by the Code of Ethics to formally request an advisory opinion about a potential conflict of interest. Then also, like what we acted on last month, we can also provide advisory opinions, in response to informal requests to, departments, they want a clarification about the gift ordinance, and so we were able to, with Susan's work with the city attorney, clarified some things that really were kind of left undefined in the ordinance, so that provides more clarity. So any advisory opinions we issue would be there. Folder 5 is public documents related to complaints filed with the Ethics Commission, and of course many of the documents related to a complaint are confidential and aren't there. They're stored in secure files at the clerk's office. But any documents related to a complaint that have been made public, they can find there. They're organized by complaint number. At the minimum, each complaint, anytime we act on it, there's, that form that we adopted that basically tells the story of like when it was received, when we met, like any decisions we made, so that they can look at that and know whatever was made public about it. Folder 6 is annual reports of the Ethics Commission. So, we filed early this year, our report for last year, and so people can go back as the commission files additional annual reports in the future, they'll be there. Folder 7 is called documentation verifying compliance with training. And so there's 3 subfolders within that folder. The first one has to do with, it's a COI, conflict of interest and training report. And so, anytime an employee is hired, somebody's first appointed to a board or commission, Patty Goddard and the HR director, she's developed an online ethics training thing that we're all supposed to do within, I think the ordinance, 6 weeks of your appointment. And then there's like an online form, we've all done this, that you click on, not only like verify that you've completed the training, but also disclose any potential conflict of interest you might have. IT and HR, they collect that it goes into a spreadsheet, and then quarterly, the HR department, they send to Lacey, it starts from the beginning of the year, everybody that's completed that. So there's so they sent the first quarter report around the end of March, 1st of April. And so it started fresh with January, list everybody that, whether it was a new hire or, recertification or whatever, they send a new report every quarter up till the end of the year, and they're cumulative. So if you look in there, if you want to know who's done the training in a given year, you can always just look at the latest one, and it has everything that's in the earlier ones for that year. So, you can look and see, when was the last time any given, you can look and see when was the last time any of us completed the training and what we said to response to conflict of interest. The second subfolder is like copies of the State Board of Accounts forms that have been submitted by official or employee. So if anybody files the formal conflict of interest form, you'll find a copy of it there. They file it with the clerk. It's supposed to be filed with the state, and people can find it here too. And then finally, there's a folder for disclosure forms for contracts with a relative. So disclosure is required if the city contracts with relatives of elected officials, appointed officials, employees, or with business entities owned by those relatives. And so if anybody files such a disclosure, they file it with the clerk's office, and it would be placed in there. And then finally, the last one, and this is the one where there's probably the most documents that you'll find. There's public documents related to purchases of $5,000 or more. So within that, there's a subfolder for each year. And within that folder for the year, there are PDF files that's copies of contracts, quotes, invoices, and other documentation related to purchases of $5,000 or more. The file name of each document includes the date. I think in some cases it's the date it was signed. In some cases it's the day of the Board of Works meeting where it was, if it was contract, when it was approved. But it's a date, related to then. It's generally got like the name of the vendor in the file name. Sometimes it will have like the department name. It might say, MPD if it was police department thing. So, you could look at that. It's a lot of information there. I'll say big shout out to Lacey Jones. She maintains all of this for us and stays on top of it. And so, I'll brag on it a little bit. I think we've probably got the most up-to-date and current information of any board or commission in the city on our webpage, and that's a lot due to the fact that she's just on top of that. I found last year, you found the same thing. Once you send something to her, it's generally up later that day. So that's what's on there. I thought this might help. I can send a PDF version of this that you can hand to Lacey, and we can put in it'll show up in the, there's a space for documents and stuff down at the bottom of the main page. But people can download this and might, if they're curious. Because I think one of the things that, a lot of times, one of the things people are interested in and make public document requests, they want copies of those contracts. And somebody's got to respond to that. One of the advantages of this, if we consolidate all these in one place, I would encourage anybody, if you're curious about a contract that the city's entered into, beginning last year. Of course, there's nothing before the Ethics Commission took effect. Go look there. You can probably you should be able to find, if it is a contract, you should be able to find a copy of it there.
Is it read only, or can you download it?
You can download it. It's
Okay.
It's the same system that you get a copy of city council agenda or the ordinances and all that. It's so kind of self-service on a certain subset of public documents.
Remind me again, it's this transparency portal is only accessible through the Ethics Commission page, or can you go through the clerk's office as well in their page?
As far as I know, the only link is on our page.
On our page, okay.
But it's it's in big letters.
Yeah.
You can't miss it once you get on the page. So, hopefully that'll be useful to anybody. There's a lot of information there. It can be kind of daunting if you just look at it and try and figure out what all's here. There's a lot of stuff there, but so this list may help people figure out if
this is great.
Interested in it.
Sure, thank you so much. So theoretically, this increases transparency, and it also should decrease the records requests because it's already available, and be very helpful.
Yeah, I think it'd be one of those things that people aren't aware of this. If they make a document request to, the normal channels, it's a contract, there should be a tell if it's, 2025 or later, they should be able to go to the transparency portal and get it.
So, with that being said, I want to acknowledge and thank Chip for all of the work he's done on this particular project, making sure that it's up and running. He's provided a very good foundation for us going forward, and so that takes us to our discussion now of maybe what we need to do, pulling up the transparency portal guidelines from our ordinance, and this would be section 43.02 transparency portal, and that's number 8, as we just discussed. To be comprehensive, this needs to include executed contracts, and I know Lacey's working really hard to get the signed contracts, not the ones that were previous to the meeting and them being signed. Requests for bids, requests for proposals, invitations to quote, and documents received from potential suppliers presenting their final bid, proposal, or quote in response to requests for bids, request for proposal or invitation to quote. So, at this point, the focus has been on getting the contracts, but there's an awful lot more that we have, been asked to add to this. So I think that this is the time where we need to discuss what do we need to do going forward to be more comprehensive on what we've been commissioned to do. So I'm gonna open the floor to any comments. I know we've discussed this briefly, just, everything that, should go in here should be through, the Board of Works. Correct or not?
Let me explain a little bit of what I know about sort of the purchasing process and the thresholds, and I had, Jim and I got together with this early on, because he's very familiar with, you know, public purchasing. But so basically, below $5,000, there's like what the state calls informal procedures, and different places will handle it different ways. A lot of times it involves it. We're not concerned about any of that. It's all $5,000 now.
I apologize, I'll be back to lock up, so you guys can just make your way out. I'll get back maybe 7 or after.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, so I'll take care of locking up. Just hit the lights on your way out.
Okay. So, so basically, if you think about public purchasing, like so state law, defines like some procedures. They assign a set of procedures for products that are public works, which are a little more involved, more detailed. Then the general set of procedures. Then the city has a purchasing ordinance that implements that within the state law. And so basically, at $5,000 and up, the general process, the city makes known to potential bidders what they want to buy. The potential vendors give them prices and information, and then city officials make a selection from that. Now, what happens is, as you go, there are dollar thresholds, and as you get, start purchasing more and more expensive things, that process, as you might understand, gets a lot more involved. So, from $5,000 up to less than $20,000 on the non-public work stuff, they can actually do telephone quotes. So, they could, we did this when I worked in local government in Missouri. It's like, especially a lot of standard stuff. We bought a lot of hardware and stuff. So like if we wanted, 500 4-inch bolts, right, of a certain grade, you call around, you get some prices, you document that, and then they're all the same. You buy the cheapest ones. So, there's some stuff purchased like that, but unless there's a contract, that normally I don't think would come to the Board of Public Works, right? I mean,
Right.
But they're supposed to keep paperwork on that. Everything we've asked for is state law or ordinance
That's what I was gonna
requires.
ask. What you're describing in section 8, 5,000 above, is dictated by state law.
Yeah,
Not by us, not by
exactly.
the city, it's by the state
Yeah.
law. Okay.
We're asking, what the ordinance requires, to be submitted for the transparency portal is paperwork that's already supposed to exist. There's nothing that anybody has to create to respond to this. It's all,
And anything below $5,000 is at the purview of the city to determine how they want to process.
Yeah.
And monitor.
Yeah. I've done work with other people around. I think, a lot of cities, local governments, that's a lot, they move the purchasing cards and stuff, and a lot of
Right.
departments, they can buy their own, minor, that they'll have their own internal, regulations. Then at $20,000, it's like, you have to do a more formal bidding process where there's, a request for proposals, as opposed to, just a request for quotations. And then they receive bids and they open them up, and so that's sort of like the 3 levels. Like I said, Public Works is a little different, because it's usually, it's larger dollar amounts, and so they've got a really detailed process for, distributing the specifications and the requirements, and, responding to inquiries and all that. But it's still, at the end of the day, they put out the information, people submit bids. When Jim and I met and talked about this, you reached out to Gretchen Cheeseman
Right.
in community development, because they spend a lot of federal money, right? The CDBG grant and that. And so there's some federal requirements on that. Gretchen was nice enough, she sent a spreadsheet she had put together that had it all lined up, and of course, even the federal requirements, there's maybe some different thresholds, but it's the same purchasing methods, right? I mean, you know, it's like, the cheaper it is, the more informally you can do it, and then, I mean, that's, you know, you see if you've ever watched Board of Public Works or looked at the minutes, a lot of times they'll have, you know, part of the grant program, like, they're fixing, you know, they're putting new roofs on some houses, and so they come in, there's a list of the houses, there's a list of the people that bid on them, and, you know, and it's.
And the requirements for federal may dictate labor rates
Yeah.
that they have to pay.
Right,
Right.
yeah, so, you know, they've got some additional hoops they've gotta jump through, but the purchasing process is basically the same. So.
And it's, to be clear, it's somewhere between 50 and 150,000. They have to seek out 3, and they gotta notify people in the paper they're doing that. Above 50, they have to publicly bid it. It has
Yeah.
to be a public bid at that point in time.
Yeah.
So anything.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
different thresholds.
Thresholds.
Once it gets, you know, I guess from our point of view, it's like eventually, all those, if there's bids or if there's a contract, right? And not every, you know, not every purchase is gonna be formal bids, and a lot of the things that maybe you do through like just like quotations, there's not gonna be a contract, you're just buying standard
Right.
stuff. They, you know, they deliver it, they send you an invoice, city pays the bill. But, you know, the stuff that comes with Board of Public Works is if there's bids, and if there's a contract, and like generally, you know, those two things go together. I think, you know, so last year, when, you know, we talked about this, you know, we were focused on other stuff early on, and then we got to a point, we'd looked into this, and, you know, I sent a memo, to the mayor and all the department heads on behalf of the commission, and said, hey, you know, we wanna start, you know, populating transparency portal, so here's a list of what's needed. That time I met, you know, the mayor reached out, I met with the mayor, city attorney, some leadership from the police department, the fire department. They had some questions about the process, and it looked like everything was fine, and I guess shortly after that, it's like they started sending stuff down to Lacey, and she started putting it up on the portal. I was watching, you know, mainly focused on the contracts to try and, you know, that was the one thing I could, you know, we don't know, you know, there are records, but you know, there's no meeting where they discuss the things that are like done through a quotation. So I started, you know, putting together a list of all the contracts that were approved at the Board of Public Works and checking what was there. And, you know, last year we were, you know, sent out another request later, you know, reminding people to, you know, department heads to send stuff. Reached out, I'll tell you, the police and fire department, it's like, their stuff, if it's not complete, I would really be surprised, cause I mean, they send everything to Lacey. There's, you know, I mean, one of the things they were concerned about when we talked, they, you know, they buy some, you know, those two departments, they buy a lot of specialized stuff. So it's, you know, some of it's like single sourced, because like once you've decided what kind of ballistic vest you're gonna buy, but when you gotta replace the plates, you know, it's like, it comes from that
Right.
vendor, you know, you don't,
Right.
you know. And so they were kinda, and I told them, I said, that's not a concern. And so, I mean, they send, you know, they buy a car, there's information in there about the car they bought, same thing with the fire department. Deputy Chief Nen, he, often a lot of it, there's a little document, a little explainer in the front that like explains what it's for. Somebody looks at it, like wondered, you know, what this is. It's like, there's a little paragraph there explaining what it is. I mean, there's a lot of information in here. You know, there were about, like somewhere between like 12 and 24 contracts that just didn't get up there last year. I know I was going over with it, over the list with, you know, Lacey at the end of the year. Of course, she's the recording secretary for Board of Public Works too. So like, this stuff's all supposed to come to her. You know, so she had, when I showed her the list, she's like, I think I've got some of these, at least so the preliminary ones. I don't have the signed copy, because like they don't They apparently don't always send that to her. But she's got a copy of whatever was presented to the Board of Public Works, and will have like maybe their signatures on it, but like won't necessarily have the copy that then was signed by the by the vendor. So she filled in the gaps there, best she could, but like there's some stuff I think they haven't provided to her for one reason or another. So that's, in a nutshell, that's like what we're trying to get there. I feel like we're pretty complete on the contracts, at least a version of the contract. If it's maybe not the executed, the final executed contract like it says, but at least it's the copy that was presented to the Board of Public Works. We don't necessarily, maybe have the request for proposals or what went out to do that, because that's not something that the Board of Public Works can, I can tell that they concern themselves with. They're just looking at the final bids, if there were any invitations to quote, like requests for quotations, short of like actual bidding process, if it didn't result in a contract, then I'm gonna say, unless it's the police or fire department, we probably don't have it in the transparency portal, because we know what gets approved to the Board of Public Works. It's like we just don't know what was bought on quotations.
And
There's no
if I
contract.
recall, the Public Board of Works is not responsible for checking off to make sure that all the documents that were required to be submitted with the bid were submitted. That's the department's responsibility. I think it's what we found out.
Yeah.
And so they have to make sure it was a complete bid.
Yeah.
That it was responsible and responsive.
Yeah.
Those are the two terms used in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we're not proposing an amendment to section 4302. You're just providing better clarification on the portal. and
Yeah,
what's there. Okay.
and I guess sort of highlighting, there are some, I think, there are some gaps between what the ordinance says is supposed to be in the portal and what's actually there. And that's not a criticism of me, but this was a big change for everybody. I know when I met with the mayor and city attorney last year, I said, I know this is something new. I said, we just, want to work with everybody, try and get it. I said, we gave them sort of like some staggered deadlines, asked them, they get the bigger stuff first, because I said, I know, they've all got work to do. They don't, necessarily have a lot of time to dig around the files and pull that stuff out.
So ultimately, the first goal in getting this set up was getting it set up and getting a foundation.
Yeah.
Which we have. So now taking it to the next step, any recommendations on how we should start pursuing getting these requests and proposals and those kinds of things as something we can upload. So, one of my thoughts was, some of these things aren't opened until the actual meeting. They're in an envelope, they're opened up,
Right.
so it wouldn't even be available before meetings. So the question is, would we want to ask them to do maybe a submission of the packet of the proposals and the bids and the contract to Lacey, so that it's a little bit more comprehensive? I mean, they're gonna have the information anyways, but ask them to make sure that the rest of the information is provided with the contract when it is submitted to the clerk's office. That might take a little bit of education, it may take a little bit of follow-up, but I think that it's worth the legwork to do that and to get this in the next step of getting a little bit more comprehensive towards where we need to go.
Yeah, I think it would be good for you to talk to Lacey and get her insight, because she knows like how, the documents and information is flowing now, and so she could very likely have, she and Belinda have some ideas and insights into, but.
Get her recommendation. on what
Yeah,
she would suggest.
but it seems like for everything that comes before the Board of Public Works, which is gonna be, I would say, all the major stuff, right? Because I mean, if it's bids or there's a contract, you know, that's gonna cover a lot of the major purchases, and they come to the Board of Public Works. That if there was a way, you know, if Lacey thought it was, you know, feasible to ask them to, like, not just submit the contract that that they were asking the board to, but like the, you know, a copy of the whole bid file.
Which could be a lot of
Not the whole bid file, but I mean, but the things that are listed, because what we asked for here is like, not everything, and because
Yeah.
this is some feedback Stephen Brand gave the committee when we're putting this together, because it was originally written that way, so you realize that's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
And so we came back and like, so that's why, like, we're looking for the RFPs and the RFQs, we're looking for the final bids from.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
And my question is gonna be, I know we did at Ball State, when you receive bids, you might receive 10, you might receive 3. They're all summarized in a spreadsheet, and that's posted, so that you know who all bid, who
Yeah.
was the lowest, and what they submitted in terms of alternate prices for everybody's availability, more so for the bidders.
Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't win the bid, who was high, who was low.
Yeah.
And for the public. And so we posted that after the fact, and it stayed there for a period of
Yeah.
time. We don't know if the Public Board of Works is doing that right.
So what I see in the minutes so this, a lot of the stuff that comes from community development. So like if, you know, they're spending CDBG money putting new roofs on people's houses, they'll come in, there'll be a list of all the addresses, you know, so it'll be a list of all the addresses down this way. There's 3 or 4 bidders that bid on the roofs, you know, so there's a column for each one, and that will be in the minutes. Now I think, I don't really see that much in the minutes from other, you know, but also things that come to, and something I mentioned before, then there's also like if they're purchasing professional, you know, if they're looking for professional services as opposed to goods, then like they do a request for qualifications, you know, which lays out what they're looking for and their criteria for choosing. But even then, once they hire them for a project, then usually there's some sort of scope of work and there's a contract, because everybody wants to make sure they get paid, right? And so that eventually comes back. So, you know, there's been an RFQ, there's been a response to an RFQ for the park, I think for the park department that has come to the Board of Public Works, but like they haven't chosen anybody yet. But like the RFQ, I guess Lacey had it, the RFQ is up in the. It might be helpful. This is a list. This is everything that's mentioned in the Board of Public Works minutes for the first quarter, and I broke it down by department. And so there's description of the contracts, and an indication about, you know, if there's something on the transparency portal. So there's some things that are not. There's some things that are there, but they're not like the final signed version, and then there's some where like the version that's up there actually has all the signatures on it, and so
This is created for us, this is not posted on the transparency portal, or
This was just an audit that he had done to help us
just
to.
his audit, okay.
Yeah.
Correct, it's an informal audit.
now so at the end of 2025 we put up a version of this it's not broken down by department, but it's just it's a list of all the contracts that were approved to the Board of Public Works as an indicator whether you can find that in the transparency portal or not.
So beginning 2026, somebody could look back in 2025 and look at all this.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then in 2027, same thing.
Yeah.
Look back to see similar information for 26 and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Which is good.
this is a working copy so
Yeah.
that we know where to follow up and try to pull in some documentation.
Okay. Good stuff. So you're keeping this updated
Yeah.
in your sleep?
I've got,
It is extra time.
I've developed, a little system that uses, artificial intelligence that reads the minutes and puts this table together, except for.
Now, that's what it was
I-
for,
Right, there
that's
you go.
what it's for.
And, And so then I just like, when it gets to the table, I go back, like I look at the, scan the agendas, cause sometimes they present something that's a little out of the ordinary, it'll miss it, and so I'll fill it in, but like I'd say out of like everything, I think there were two things that I looked and said, oh, this didn't make it in the report, I had to kind of put it in
Thanks for doing that.
manually.
That's for sure.
So
Yeah,
really,
my retirement, that's become my hobby, is figuring out ways to get artificial intelligence to do
To do
things
the
for
work.
me, yeah.
so essentially, there's only about 7 things that we're gonna need to follow up on to make sure that they're, in there. Maybe a couple are in there that aren't signed, but they're in there.
Yeah, I
As
think
far
there,
as-
I think there are about, yeah, it looks like there's 7 things that aren't there,
As far as the
That are-
contract itself,
yeah.
and then, action item will be to get with Lacey and see, how we can get a more comprehensive packet when, these are being submitted, that's gonna include, more of the RFQs and those types of
Yeah.
things, so that there will be more information.
Yeah, I think maybe the thing to focus on now would be getting like, the more complete information for the stuff that comes to the Board of Public Works. And then at some point, if that's ever worked out, then maybe like go to some system, see if we're actually getting all the stuff that doesn't go to the Board of Public Works, because I don't have a good feel for how much stuff that is. Cause I mean, you can look at the list of claims, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's under $5,000.
Well, I think that this is just the next step we need to
Yeah.
take, and it's gonna take time to get the process worked out and to get it running, fully,
Yeah.
the way that we want it to go.
Yeah, we're not trying to go from like 0 to 100 in 3 seconds or something, it's just, I think we've started like with the low hanging, the low hanging fruit stuff that's, relatively easy to get and is important. Those contracts that come to the Board of Public Works, like, that's major, it's major expenditures of money, and it's, expenditures of money on important stuff, so, I think the thing to remember too, if, once you've got, if you've got the contract, that's available there, if somebody, for whatever reason, wanted more information, that at least, that gives them the hook to file access to public records request, because they can refer to a specific contract and ask for stuff related to that. So that's one reason why last year, like, I really just tried to focus on getting the contracts up there, because, if you know the contract, you can file a request to get virtually anything else that you think might be of interest.
And again, for those who may watch this is not outside of the requirements of the ordinance. It is part of the requirement of the ordinance. That's why we're involved in it.
So it's written in the ordinance, this is what's supposed to go in the transparency portal. And what we've listed here and what we've been, requested, from the departments and, Board of Public Works and whatnot, is all paperwork that they're supposed to keep related to the purchases. Cause they're all public records that would be subject to a request if somebody asked for them, barring proprietary information or something that, would have to be redacted, but.
And we're acknowledging that not everything is comprehensive, but we are
Right.
working towards those ends.
Right.
Yeah. And I wanna say again, like, in setting this up and working on getting the documents, it's like Lacey Jones is just a champ. And, Belinda's good to work with too, but like Lacey's the, day-to-day go-to on, anything that's needed.
So again, no action item, just information.
Not a technical action item,
Yeah.
but I will go ahead and meet with Lacey,
Okay.
and see what her recommendations are, and
Perfect.
Belinda's absolutely part of the blend too, and then we'll figure out, what we can do, to try to keep moving forward with this. So,
Thank you.
okay, anything else anybody would like to mention before we move on? So, okay. Next on the agenda would be any other business. And one one of the things that I'm going to just mention, is I sent a copy of, a letter to each commissioner, which is requesting a review of our meeting place. And so, we've been meeting here in the MSD office for a couple of months, and we would like it reconsidered to be more accessible to the public. There's several reasons documented in this letter, which is a formal request, and that will be available for review. But on behalf of the commission, we do not feel that our current meeting place is the most appropriate place for us to be meeting, and we have made a formal request. So more to follow, but I did want to mention that in the meeting. So.
Good.
Okay, any other comments or business or anything else we need to discuss while we're here?
Our next actual meeting is, unless we have a complaint, is, you put it in your email, is that May or
August.
June?
August,
It's August, so you get a break of 2 or 3 months.
right.
Okay.
So our next scheduled meeting is the second Wednesday in August,
Second.
and it's at 6 p.m. And we'll be able to, at that point, review where we're at with the transparency portal and discuss anything else that may come up.
Yeah, that would be August 12th.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Okay, yeah, and I'll send you, a PDF of this that you can send to Lacey to make available up on there. And I'll have our video be up on our, YouTube page tomorrow.
Perfect, thank you so much. If there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Guys have a good evening. Enjoy.